There is a powder that stops damp walls permanently, not for a season, not until the next heavy rain, permanently. It costs $3 a bag at any builder's merchant. It has worked without failure for over 2,000 years. The Romans used it to waterproof harbour walls that are still dry today. And the reason your walls are damp right now, the reason a company quoted you $2,000 to fix them, is not because the problem is complicated. It is because the industry that replaced this powder needed your walls to stay wet. Right now, damp-proofing companies are charging homeowners between $1,000 and $4,000 to treat walls that a $3 bag of powder would fix permanently. They drill holes along your skirting boards, inject chemical compounds into the masonry, render the wall again in the same material that caused the problem, and hand you a guarantee that independent building surveyors have documented failures within 5 to 10 years in the majority of cases, not sometimes, the majority. A landmark report commissioned by English Heritage in 2012 examined damp diagnoses across thousands of pre-war British homes and found that 75% of chemical damp-proof installations were unnecessary. The actual cause of the damp in nearly every case was the render on the wall itself. And the powder that fixes it permanently has been sitting on a shelf at your local hardware store the entire time. The year is 125 AD. Roman engineers are finishing the Pantheon in Rome. They are not using anything that resembles modern building materials. They are mixing burned limestone with water to produce a paste called calcium hydroxide, and they are rendering every interior and exterior wall surface with it. They understand something about this material that the modern construction industry has deliberately allowed you to forget. When lime render cures, it does not harden by drying out. It hardens by absorbing carbon dioxide directly from the air around it, converting back into calcium carbonate, the original limestone it came from. That process creates a render with millions of microscopic pores running through its entire structure. Water vapor passes through those pores freely. The wall breathes. Moisture that gets in from outside can also get back out. The wall never accumulates damp because the render never traps it. The Pantheon has been standing in the Roman rain for 1,900 years. Its lime render is still intact. There is not a single recorded instance of rising damp in the building's entire documented history. This is not an accident. This is the material behaving exactly as its chemistry demands. The decision that cost every homeowner reading this thousands of dollars was made between 1945 and 1960. After the Second World War, governments across Britain, America, and Europe needed to build housing at a speed that had never been attempted before. Millions of returning soldiers needed homes within years, not decades. And a new material was ready for them. Portland cement, patented in 1824 and refined through the early 20th century, sets hard in 24 hours. Lime requires 2 to 4 weeks of careful curing. On a post-war housing site building hundreds of units simultaneously, that difference meant the difference between profit and loss for every contractor on every project. So the industry chose cement, not because it built better walls, because it built faster ones. Building codes written in that period were shaped by technical committees that included cement industry representatives and excluded lime specialists. The vapor permeability specifications that would have protected lime's place in the code were never written. Compressive strength, the one metric where cement outperforms lime, became the standard by which all renders were judged. And a 2,000-year-old material that had never failed a single wall in its entire history was quietly written out of the default specification. Here is what cement render does to a wall, and why the damp proofing industry exists because of it. Portland cement render cures into a near-rigid crystalline structure with almost zero vapor permeability. Water vapor generated inside a heated building migrates outward through the wall. In a lime-rendered wall, it passes straight through and escapes. In a cement-rendered wall, it hits the render and stops. It accumulates at the interface between the masonry and the render. In winter, that accumulated moisture freezes, expands, and begins pulling the render away from the wall. In summer, it migrates downward and appears at skirting board level as the classic damp tide mark that every damp-proofing salesperson has been trained to point at and diagnose as rising damp requiring chemical injection. The Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings published a technical study in 1998 documenting that repointing historic lime-mortared stone and brick buildings with Portland cement caused more structural damage in 30 years than the preceding 300 years of lime had caused in the same walls. Read that again. The modern material caused 10 times the damage of the ancient one in 1/10 of the time. The damp-proofing industry in the United Kingdom alone generates $2.3 billion every single year. That industry exists almost entirely because cement replaced lime. It is not treating a natural problem. It is charging you to partially address a problem its own supply chain created. Here is exactly what the powder is and exactly what to do with it. Natural hydraulic lime, sold as NHL 3.5, is the correct grade for most exterior residential walls. A 50-kilogram bag costs $8 to $15 and covers approximately 5 square meters at standard render thickness. Mix it with sharp sand at a ratio of 1 part lime to 2.5 parts sand. Add water until the mix is just workable and apply it in 2 coats to the cleaned wall surface. The first coat, called the scratch coat, is applied at 10 millimeters thickness. Scratch it with a comb tool before it sets to provide a key for the second coat. The second coat is applied at 8 millimeters once the first has begun to firm, typically after 48 hours. Keep the whole wall damp for the first week of curing by misting it with water daily. This is called wet curing, and it slows the carbonation process, producing a denser, harder final surface. The total material cost for treating an average damp wall of 10 square meters is between $16 and $30. A damp-proofing company treating the same wall charges between $1,500 and $4,000 for a result that the English Heritage Report documented as failing in the majority of cases. If your home was built before 1945, it was almost certainly built with lime mortar and lime render throughout. Cement applied over original lime construction is the single most documented cause of accelerated damp in pre-war housing stock. The fix is not more cement. The fix is removing the cement and returning to the material the building was designed to breathe with. The Pantheon is still dry after 1900 years. Your walls started showing damp within a decade of the cement going on. That is not a coincidence. That is chemistry. The powder is $3 a bag. The knowledge was buried in 1950 by a construction industry that chose speed over performance, and by a damp-proofing industry that needed your walls to stay wet. Both of them are still collecting money from the decision made 70 years ago. The material that fixes it has never stopped working. It has just been waiting on the shelf for someone to open the vault. If this changed how you see your home, hit subscribe and share it with every homeowner you know. Every share keeps alive what they spent decades making you forget. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside costs them even more when you find out.